this is Dragon Videos and welcome back to my channel. We are going to go over some of the parallels between Pomni and Caine in the Amazing Digital Circus, namely about in terms of their leadership and how they handled the situation throughout the series as we bid the series farewell. Without further ado, and let's begin. And oh, yes, be aware of some spoilers, for I'm going to go over points in the plots. So, without further ado, let's begin. It's pretty clear at the beginning of the pilot where the identity of everyone is settled, namely for that between Caine and Pomni. Pomni's the newcomer who has to observe and learn anything she can from the remaining crew just so she could survive the circus and the crazy stuff that goes into it. Then the Caine part is basically where Caine is the leader of the group. His role is to make sure everything is tip-top shape and making adventures that help everyone feel occupied and grasp whatever sanity they could have, even if they can't escape the circus, which is a pretty unfortunate circumstances, especially for those like Pomni. As a result, this creates into some very new and dangerous situations where you can't help but feel bad for Pomni. And it can be a little understandable that Pomni wants to get away from it all and get out of there. But once she realizes that she can't, then she just tries to maintain whatever sanity she has left and prevent herself from abstracting, which is what plagued her later on in episode 2. And with Caine, he definitely seemed like he wanted to make sure Pomni was safe and didn't get abstracted to a certain degree. Though right now it seemed a bit destructive. And in episode 2, it was pretty clear that Caine has a problem with considering everyone else's feelings, especially when he destroyed Gummy Goo without any hesitation or even asking questions about why Pomni brought an NPC there, and never even considered what could happen to the mental state of those around him. And it was pretty clear that this was just the beginning of their transformation at that point. The turning point in their parallels began to become more apparent in episodes 4 and 5, where you begin to see the characters act like someone else entirely. So in terms of episode 4, this is where Pomni begins to try to help out Gangles when she was suffering a mental breakdown after a very long day working a fast food restaurant. And then when it came to episode 5, this is where Caine really begins to lose it. He doesn't like of how everyone's suggested adventures were starting to become better than his. And even he flipped with the stargazing adventure where everyone was actually legitimately happy. And as he said in episode 3, adventures were the one thing he's actually good at. But it's pretty apparent that, as we see later on, that his leadership skills aren't exactly the best. He doesn't recognize when he's hurting people, and he doesn't even realize that what he's doing is even destructive. He just basically throws a tantrum about the situation and never even acknowledges of what went wrong. Due to the fact that he's an AI, which is later confirmed in episode 8, it is pretty clear that he has the incapability of understanding human emotions in general. As for Pomni, she begins to interact with Jax a bit more and knows how to handle the situation when it's called for it. By episodes 6 and 7, this is where things definitely take a huge turn at that point. In episode 6, Pomni is a bit calmer and just anticipating whatever adventure that Caine might throw at her. And in this case with Caine, he's gotten a little lazy with the adventures as of late, going as far as giving guns to the crew and basically leaving them to have a shootout with each other. And then there was the point where things definitely take a dark turn. Pomni begins to observe Jax, and not only that, but recognizes that Jax might not be the best option when it comes to being paired with Kinger. She's not 100% sure what might happen, but it might involve a lot of pranks that may hurt Kinger in the process while they're playing their little gunfight. As a result, she tries to keep a close eye and learns more about Jax, and begins to address him in a way that nobody else could. As for Caine, he becomes a little bit more isolated and pouty, wanting nothing more than to just sulk when things don't go his way. By episode 7, this is where Caine crosses the line, and I will say this, it's going to be very hard to forgive him for what he did. Basically, Pomni begins to develop some hope when she begins to see Abel lurking around during a nice little beach escapade in the beginning of episode 7. Jax, of course, was keeping his distance, but Pomni begins to take the proactive concept of trying to include everyone and tries to do what's best for everyone to a certain degree, even if it means excluding Kinger as a result. But another thing that happened is she tries to piece together the things that they can and cannot do in their current situation compared to Pomni in the past, who would be like, okay, this is how things are going to happen, I'll just roll with it. And then at that point, she begins to question certain things. And one thing definitely considered was of how Abel was repeating himself, make the right choice. Then the ultimate deceiving episode where it definitely was gut-wrenching, namely when Pomni and the crew realized that they had been bamboozled by Caine into another adventure. And this is also where Caine, unable to realize the gravity of what he has done, begins to backpedal and does half-truths, and on top of that, admitted to the fact that he created a special adventure that involved deceiving everyone to thinking that they could escape the circus, when it turns out that was not going to be the case, which resulted in them betraying Caine or losing their trust in him, and then it turns into a betrayal for the rest towards Jax as well. But for Pomni, the crew begins to rely on her and trust on her more and more as the series progressed, and look to her for guidance. So, for the ultimate deal breaker of a parallel between both Pomni and Caine, it was basically episode 8, where finally Caine snapped, and he was no longer the cheerful and in-control AI that we were first introduced to the pilot. His obsession of trying to get approval from the rest of the gang had finally reached a deadly boiling point. He had enough. He was through screwing around and practically raised heck for everyone around him. And even Pomni was finally done playing around as well. She soon realized that there was no point in trying to find exits to the circus, because it was just going to make their obsession of escape worse than before. And Pomni definitely agreed of what Ragatha said, that there's nothing worse than trying to get an obtainable goal. And in this way, that was what was happening with Caine. The more he tried deceiving and being more insensitive to others, granted that he was basically an AI with no understanding of human emotion, But it didn't change the fact that his inability to recognize the destruction of his adventures and his own behavior definitely caused a huge rift between the gang. And for Pomni, she becomes more aware and empathetic towards the crew, and going as far as trying to protect them from the harm they may come across later, even recognizing that Kinger seems to be the only person who can help them survive the circus and take down Caine once and for all. She begins to become more proactive and figuring out ways of trying to get things to go into their favor, even at the expense of almost dying. And finally, the my favorite part of all of this was when she finally told Caine off, and Caine, finally being fed up, released the worst capabilities. So, in a lot of ways, these two really have changed since the start of a pilot, and episode 9 is upon us, so it'll be interesting to see of how Pomni's character is going to be tied over by the end of this hour-long special. So what do you think of a parallel? What do you think what Caine will do? Do a like and subscribe. This is Dragon Veos signing off.